Welcome everybody to this our second seminar for 2026, and welcome Josh. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks so much, Craig, and thanks, Kevin.
Hmm. I'll just say a few words by way of introduction for those who are on the call today who are not familiar with you. So, Melbourne-based, internationally renowned musical theatre performer. Career has taken you all over the world, including starring roles on London's West End in Les Mis and also as the Phantom and the Phantom of the Opera. Along the way, you also have had some significant life challenges, which really provided quite an impetus for you to do some inner work. And I dare say the Behind the Mask book, which we'll find out more about later on, is really, I guess, a good metaphor for that. So that helped you to grow through adversity and then to go on and feel very moved to help provide what you'd learned to others as well. Self-development courses, seminars, workshops, working with sports people, sporting teams, artistic performers, corporate settings, and so on. So still doing the theatre, but lots of other things in your life. So we're going to explore some of this, Josh, and find out more about you and what inner work is, how meditation can help. And I suspect a topic for a lot of people on the call today has to do with performance and how to perform at our best and how to be able to do that comfortably. So perhaps I've just said a couple of words, but it'd be great to hear more about yourself and your journey from, to becoming a performer first up. Like, was that always your intention, or was it something that kind of just really loomed as time went on as you grew up?
It definitely wasn't always my intention and had no interest in it, really, other than sort of enjoying road trips down the coast annually with mum and dad, and they had Les Miserables and the cassette player, and so I learnt a few tunes there, but wasn't interested. Very sporty. Loved cricket, tennis, footy, and basketball growing up, and it wasn't until I was about 15, 16. I watched a Michael Jackson special of Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5. So it would have been early noughties and maybe 2001. And I just had to learn how to moonwalk. I was always a bit of a show pony and decided to moonwalk in the school cafeteria one day in year 11. And obviously, when you're moonwalking, you can't see where you're going. But I fortuitously, and I don't believe in coincidences anymore, bumped into the director of the school musical. He said, "Oh, that's a fancy move. We could use that in a production. We're doing a show called Fame. Have you ever heard of it?" I'm like, "No, never heard of it." But anyway, auditioned for it, auditioned successfully, got a great role in it, and just fell in love and couldn't believe that I hadn't explored this before. I think there was a part of it that was the creative process and finding character and transporting into character, and this joy for singing and dancing and acting really sparked. But I think there was also more unconsciously. That level of validation and being seen and heard and noticed and appreciated and loved by an external audience was probably in some way making up for some sort of lack in my own sense of worthiness and enoughness, and maybe speaks to some childhood stuff that we all carry. I didn't find that out for probably another 15 years or so when I played the Phantom, but it certainly sparked my interest in performing, and from there I did the school musical in year 12 and went off and studied that at the University of Ballarat. It was there in Perth for me. I didn't get into WAPA, which is the academy in Perth, and studied it, and the journey began a year in Japan, working for Disney, and then I joined a group called the Ten Tenors. I found this voice that I didn't know was there because it wasn't there to start with, and actually was having tests and whatever on my vocal cords. It's sort of it's prone to singing given the right training and technique. I've got some good genetics there, and just explored singing, and then from about 2009-10, I was just playing roles in musicals, West Side Story and Hairspray and Cats, and travelling back and forth from London and wherever else, and then it sort of culminated in from about 2018. I went across to London trying to get a gig in something bigger, and through a series of events of back and forthing, it culminated in playing the Phantom on the West End, and then coming back and doing that same role here at the Opera House and the Arts Centre in Melbourne, then getting asked back to play the lead in Les Miserables. But inside of that, from about 2015, when I got divorced, I got married very young, the inner journey started, and meditation and yoga and breathwork became a huge part of my growth. And I always say that I don't think it was more applause that sort of expanded or excelled my career. It was this process of going inward and working out, really who the human being is beyond the human doing, and maybe even deeper than that, what is this space of awareness, this soul that lives behind all those things.
Mm. Hugh Jackman, of course, apart from being a very famous performer, is also avid meditator and has done a lot of inner work in his own life. Have you ever crossed paths with him, had conversations about any of this, if you have crossed paths with him?
No, I haven't, and it just hasn't worked out. There's been so many close calls, and we share so many mutual friends, and I'd love to chat with you both about meditation and about the journey of playing a role like Jean Valjean, which is such a sort of hero's journey type role. But we use similar techniques and share different real similarities. Like we both share a similar mantra before we get out on stage about sort of like letting go of any sense of self and just being like a divine vessel to allow music and lyrics and creation to be transported through to the audience to share with them, to take them on a journey. So really it's a relinquishing of ego and anything, and just being a vessel. And so that's something I know that he does, that I've been doing for a while, that I feel really connected with him on. Yeah.
Well, so many people who perform musically, acting and so on, love it because, in a sense, it takes them so much out of themselves and takes them so much into the present moment. Is that really what you found when you started performing in that way?
Yeah, I don't think you have a choice if you're going to do it properly to be anywhere other than present. The next scene or note hasn't been sung or played out yet, and if you're casting your mind back enough to the mistake you made in the last scene, chances are you'll make a mistake in the next moment, the one after that, and the one after that. And so the only moment where it's alive, the show is alive, is in the present moment. And so you have to surrender into presence, and knowing that you know what you're doing, you know the lines, you know the score, you know where the blocking is. It's about surrendering into the present moment and allowing creativity to flow intuitively from that space. That's easier said than done.
Creativity is an interesting thing too. Like we think, I mean, the person who wrote the music, the person who wrote the play, they've done the creative work, and the actor, the performer, is just there reproducing what's been given to them. But where's the creativity with the actor as well? Because, I mean, there must be so much in interpretation, so much inflection, how you give life to a character, how you interpret that character. I mean, there's an enormous amount of creativity in all of that.
Totally. I mean, I take a role like the Phantom I think I was the 33rd year or 34th year of its run on the West End when I played it. So let's say 50 artists have played it before me, and often the question is, well, how do you not recreate what they've done or copy what Michael Crawford or Anthony Warlow or whoever else who's played it? And I think, you can't be anyone but yourself. You can't bring anything to a role but your own sense of experience and life experience. And so it's incumbent on the individual to explore the depth within themselves so they can bring that depth to the role. And so a creative process has to be governed by an individual's own journey and experience. It can't be a recreation or rehashing of someone else's stuff, or emulating or impersonating someone else's version of it. The creation starts within your soul. And I think creativity is like the language of the soul. And so we're going out there to express the music and the artistry of our soul. And I think we're all creators in some way. We're creative beings. I think that's part of what it is to be human. And so the stage becomes such a vehicle for an expression of that creativity. It's a magic place.
It's interesting saying we're all creative, because I suspect a lot of people feel that maybe they're not. And do you have concerns these days about the more and more that we outsource our creativity to AI and so on, and the more and more sort of screen-based activities that kind of where we're not out making stuff, doing stuff. Kids play, for example, tends to be a lot less interactive and playful these days. You're concerned that, as a species, we're almost going to lose our creativity, or it's going to diminish unless we do something actively to preserve it?
No, I sort of feel like it's going to expand it. In some way, AI will hopefully, do the robot work and we can do the creative work. But I mean, I say we're creators in the sense that, we're all, as Ram Dass would say, God in drag, and that we're creating our own experience of the world through our state, our physiological state, and whether we're highly anxious or whatever, through the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the world, our narrative, our inner dialogue, and where we cast our, what I call spotlight, so state story spotlight, but where we put our focus, our intention, our attention, our awareness on, we're constantly creating our life. And, and that's why there's that little bit of God in all of us. And I think that speaks to the meditative space. It's that Rumi idea that we're not a drop in the ocean, we're the entire ocean in a drop, and there is that bit of the universe, that spark of the universe within all of us we can create. And if we see our life through that creative lens, it sort of helps diminish the victim lens with which we often see ourselves, through our suffering. It's I feel like it becomes an antidote to that suffering and to that victim mindset. That this is happening, so this is happening to me, this is happening to me. No, this is happening for me, and how can I use it to create? Often it's like our obstacles just get in our way, and I've had enough of them in my career. God, 2023 doing Les Mis, got smacked in the throat in a rehearsal, and couldn't sing for 6 weeks, and then later on that year was out surfing and got knocked in the same spot, and that was enough to do some nerve damage. And I couldn't sing for a year, and I could have just gone, oh, my suffering, oh, my woe, oh, my obstacle. But, I'm one for quotes. So what's Marcus Aurelius, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. So the obstacle becomes the way. And that having that year off singing is what made me start a coaching business and write a book and start a podcast about this stuff. And, I could explore spaces that I hadn't been able to explore before, because I was so caught up in 7 or 8 shows a week playing these awesome roles in musicals. So yeah, I think we always have the capacity to create if we see our life through a creative lens.
When that kind of adversity happened, and for somebody who's performing at the level that you were, and to have that kind of injury that potentially threatens your career, had the sort of inner work you'd done before that kind of prepared you for that?
Unbelievable.
Were you, like, because to lean into a situation like that, I mean, you kind of lean back, oh no, but to lean into a situation like that and to learn from it, to grow through it, would be, I dare say, pretty taxing.
Yeah, my mates would say, like, I couldn't talk for 12 days when the injury happened. And they're like, what are you going to do? I went to my mates and my family. I'm like, oh, look, I think I'm due for Vipassana. So I'm just going to not talk and meditate for 12 days. I'm just going to turn my living room here in London into a bit of a Zen den and and meditate, do a few 90-minute sessions and listen to some great wisdom from people I love, and use it as a process. Like, I can't go out, sort of like COVID times, like I can't go out and do what I do. So it's time to go in. and we're always in a dance between the in and the out. And when the universe throws those sort of rocks at you, it was a bit of a boulder. Um, then it's it's an invitation to go in and delve further in, and then use what I learned. And it was amazing because when I went back and played the role, so much of where I was going into were places of Jean Valjean, which was the role I was playing, and it only made the role deeper. This is a very spiritual man, Jean Valjean. So it was exactly what needed to happen. Like the suffering was perfect. You know what I mean? It's all just happening perfectly, as fucked up as it was. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you feel like I feel obviously like I'm not sort of sociopathic where you go, oh, this isn't shit. I feel the shit and I feel the pain, but I'm moving through it and using it rather than being attached to it. Like I'm just a victim in this and the world's against me, and
Was that something that you were remembering and reminding yourself at the time, or was it something when you came through it and looked back, you kind of saw it like that, or was it
no.
something you really had to do a lot of mental work to sort of keep reminding yourself to see it in that kind of way?
Well, no, because the last time I was on the West End was playing Phantom 2019, 2020, and that run got cut short. Like I was about to sign, I'd done 6 months, 7 months, and I was about to sign on for the second year. And then COVID happened, and so I missed out on, let's say, 18 months worth of work, and they were paying me really well, and I was like, oh, this is going to pay off the mortgage and whatever, and it didn't. And so I'd already endured whatever it was, but you put that into perspective, and like, I'm not playing the Phantom of the Opera, I'm not sitting here dying of COVID or whatever else. So but that was also an opportunity for deep inner work. 2020 was when I went, okay, I'm going to do a lot of work and I did a lot of courses and did a course in meditation teacher training, one that I'd wanted to do for a while, a kind of lengthy one. And so I was used to seeing adversity as opportunity, and so I just did the same thing, But once again, it wasn't like I didn't go, this is heartbreaking or this is shit. But I could zoom out enough to see how it could be beneficial if I use it through a creative lens, not a victim lens.
Did the meditation practice you had, and it sounds like, doing some pretty serious practice and retreats and so on, did them, can you say something about how meditation helped you to sort of take that perspective to sort of see, did it help to give you a bit of distance, a bit of detachment
Oh,
from it, or?
completely, totally that, Craig. I mean, that's it. The spaciousness you get from having a practice, and I have multiple practices, and some of them are mindfulness practices, some of them are more Vedic in traditions and using a mantra and whatever else. But regardless, they give you that space to see the experience, to see the thoughts, to see the feelings, to see the emotions, to see the physical pain, and not attach to it in that way, as you say, not be defined by it. And the more I could identify as a soul or as awareness or as a being experiencing this, and not this is my plight, and I'm stuck to it. The better I felt. Really, the calmer I felt, the more relaxed I felt, the less this was a stressful thing, and all of it is just building really emotional, mental resilience. Because the fact is, like, life is just going to throw shit at you all the time, whether it's another actor's forearm into your throat or something else, or COVID or whatever it is, it's going to throw it at us. But meditation, and I do a lot of breath work with people now, and it really does, speak to that idea of expanding your window of tolerance. Like, you can't control the waves, but you become more capable of being able to surf them. You can learn to surf, and that's really what has transpired. This is work from a human perspective of emotional and mental resilience for what life throws at you. Yeah, and then you get to play in life, if you know what I mean. Like, life becomes this game that you're playing in, and which is beautiful, because I think play is a natural state for us. It's explorative and joyful, and you can make mistakes, and you can be adventurous and be creative and connect with other people and with yourself. It's life becomes totally different when we build our emotional mental resilience.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to distress a lot of people and quote a bit of Shakespeare here, but when he said all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players,
Yeah,
and to see it like that, I mean, a lot of the world's great wisdom traditions do see life as a kind of a play, and even coming to it with that sort of simplicity and innocence of a child, that everything is play, experimentation, learning, growth, and so on. But unfortunately, sometimes perhaps we lose a little bit of that simplicity.
of course we do, and that's the dance of you know being a human with this thing we have, this ego, this thinking mind, and all the stuff that accumulates in it across the multitude of years that we exist on this planet, and being a soul or being awareness or however consciousness, whatever you want to call that, depending on the tradition. And I think it's just a dance between the two, and really, if I think of the word dance, it's in Sanskrit the word would be lila, which is the dance or the play of life, and the play it's coming back and forth and back and forth. And I think if we get too caught up in I'm just a soul and I don't touch the spacesuit that I'm in, then it's probably a bit too woo-woo, a bit too far gone. You've probably had your fifth LSD trip for the day, and you're flying somewhere else. But conversely, if we get too caught up in the spacesuit, we'll suffer. And I think it's about can we sit at the bridge between those worlds, and that's really what life becomes.
In terms of performing, I mean, there's performing on stage, but that's not the only place people might perform. Public speaking, performing in sport, in all sorts of ways. What have you learned about performing and the things that get in the way of being able to perform? I suppose if life's like a drama, then sometimes you're on stage and somebody doesn't come on when they're meant to, and
I've done that before.
yeah. I've got to say, in the amateur acting, and I do underline the word amateur acting I've done, I've always found that if something unexpected happens, whatever is happening is not what's meant to happen. If I recoil from that and I think, oh no, this shouldn't be happening, it always ends badly.
Terrible.
But if it's kind of like if there's an openness to it, oh, that's interesting. If lean into it, then I often find they're the best parts of the whole session. Is it like that on stage as well?
Yeah,
Like you have to have a lot of
100%.
mental control to lean into a situation and on a big stage and be open to it.
100%. I think there's a philosophy around that I really take into life, and it's just two simple words: yes and it removes judgment and it creates an openness for acceptance and curiosity. Just yes and rather than no. The moment there's a no on stage, it's a block, but when someone stuffs up, yes and where we're going here and where we're going here and where we're going, and so maybe we'll find our way back to the script somewhere. But they're the memorable moments, I did the first professional musical I ever did. Was called The Drowsy Chaperone. I was an understudy in the ensemble and had some great famous Aussie actors in it, and one who I won't name, an older actress. She just forgot to come on for a key scene where everyone starts coming on, but everyone coming on is reliant on the previous person's entrance, and she just forgot hers. She was just hanging out in the dressing room, and so we were going round in circles with dialogue and people coming off and on. This lasted for about 8 minutes until she realised, oh my God, that's my cue. We just had to repeat the situation to get back to her cue time and time again. And it's hilarious. And we still talk about it 17 years later, Those things are wonderful. You're asking a question about performers and, maybe some of the similarities between performers in different fields.
Yeah.
I think it's expectation. I think it's pressure, perceived pressure. I think it's identity. And that the identity piece is a big one, because if you're so caught up in the human doing and don't spend time getting into the openness and spaciousness of human being and what's behind that, your self-worth becomes governed by what you do. And so your enoughness is in this undulating thing of had a great speech or had a great game, I feel good, had a shit when I feel bad. And so you are diminishing your power so much by allowing who you are to be defined by what you do. And I think that is the system sort of does that. It's like, my grandma used to say to the other grandmas that she'd meet in the park with when my sister and I were about 3 and 5, who are your grandkids? She said, oh, this is the doctor and this is the lawyer. What hope did we have, sort of thing, It's just, you must succeed, because that's what gives you worth. So that's a big one. But yeah, things around, limiting self-beliefs and expectations and pressures and anxieties and all of that. And if we can get to a point where we know who we are, our real intrinsic self, our authentic self and that value, we know why we're here, maybe what purpose we're here to serve that's fundamentally not about us, but what positive contribution or impact we can have in the world and how we want to share it and why. Those goals and dreams and aspirations and hopes, whether they happen or not, become less important because you're living a life of fulfillment rather than a life that's governed purely on achievement. And when I work with clients, it's a lot around that.
One of the things striking about Ash Barty, especially when she came back to tennis after a layoff of a couple of years, was she'd say a lot about that. Your worth is not measured by if you win or don't. Like, so centered just in her own innate sort of sense of being and self that she didn't get phased in those big moments in big matches. She so very much a similar kind of message.
Very similar.
It brings to mind this sort of idea that we can get so anxious about the outcome, winning, performing well, whatever it might be, that actually creates something that gets in the way of the ability to enjoy and to perform in that moment. I mean, to unhook, it seems like a paradox to unhook our thinking from worrying about the outcome and just be in the moment with the process is where we need to do a lot of work.
100%. Well, that anxiety about outcome is just any other anxiety. It's a fear projection of the future happening in the present moment. So if we can remove the projection and remove the fear and just be in the present moment, so often that anxiety around winning or results or whatever outcomes diminishes. And then you just move into the flavor that present moment asks for. And you see those, tennis is a great one. You see those players who are just in absolute flow, where it's like the game is happening in slow motion, but all they are is in that, not even in that point, inside that point, they're in that shot or in the intricacies of that shot, but it's all happening so fluidly. They're in this beautiful oscillation between slightly aroused, because they have to be activated in order to care about what they're doing, but complete homeostasis, like they're grounded, they're calm, the body is free and relaxed. I look at Federer in his heyday and some of those backhands cross court and down the line. It's poetry, it's choreography, it's creativity, it's art. It's so beautiful to watch, and he's so free in it. And it's that word, it's freedom. And in that freedom is the freedom to potentially lose. He said Federer that he won 81% of matches and only won 56% of points ever. Isn't that incredible? So you have to be willing to be imperfect. You have to be willing to stuff it all up and not get the outcome you wanted. And that's a part of the beauty and the risk of high performance.
I'll have to check that. I don't even think it was 56%. I thought it was something like 52%. But
maybe
anyway.
it's 52. Maybe I got it wrong. But
but that's the thing.
Imperfection of this conversation.
But the thing to just to be comfortable with losing, because one of the things when you're watching somebody who is really good. Like you mentioned Roger Federer, but could be a performer on stage as well, or is struck by two things. They seem to have lots of time, and there seems to be a kind of a calmness, a sort of alertness, but a kind of a calmness.
Yeah.
And but for many of us, when we step into a situation, can have something that just takes off by itself, like fear, a kind of a panic, overwhelmed, the whole fight or flight thing is happening. What can somebody do when we're in the middle of a situation and that kind of thing is happening? How does a person work with that?
I think it starts with preparation, Craig. And because we can feel that feeling, like it's very rare that we're like, I was so calm and so chill about the whole thing. And then 7 minutes into the speech or 7 minutes into the match or the song, that's when I started feeling anxious. Like it's happening beforehand. It's our body preparing us for something that is of meaning. I mean, a lion bloody gets that anxious before it goes to take down an antelope or a zebra. It's because we care. But what I often do with people is around breath work, because it doesn't rely on anything other than yourself to change your physiological state. And, always say the state shapes our story shapes our spotlight. Like it's always that. Our physiological state and our nervous system is always going to have an impact on our internal narrative and dialogue and language you use. That's always going to have an impact on where we put our attention, awareness, intention. It's just always the case. So if I can work with people or give people some tools to change their state, the rest seems to flow on quite harmoniously. So I'll do some breath work that's actually quite activating, so that the breath meets you in a physiological state of where you're already at, and then teaches the body after that some really calming patterns to teach the body that it's okay to come out of the stress cycle. It's stress isn't the problem. It's the looping around of it, stress that can lead to, panic attacks or chronic stress or whatever. So bring them into that state, and then it's sort of like a mountain, take them down. And this is, flows that I do with a lot of different athletes, that they go for about 10 minutes, and so many of them now do it pre-training or pre-game, really, when they're a bit edgy or a bit hyper-aroused and anxious, and they just find it works so well. Because if, often we go, I've got to take just slow breaths, but it's really hard, and what we resist sort of persists. So meeting them with some quicker breaths and then teaching the body it's safe to come out of it seems to work really well. So that's what I do, and that's what I've given to lots of other people. And but similarly, the opposite can happen, Craig, where, if you feel like you've done something many times, giving this speech again, or for me, it's the 300th show, and it's a Saturday night, and I've already done one during the day. It's the 7th show of the week, and I'm a bit tired, and I want to actually activate. And so sometimes I'll do breath that does the opposite. It's not trying to calm you down. It's trying to move from more of probably a hypo aroused state into a more elevated state. So it can work both ways. And I find the breath is the easiest way to do that. And breath work, it's sort of a umbrella term for so many things, but it's meditative. Of course it is. We're putting our primary object of focus onto the breath. So it's a meditative process. You're just counting numbers while you're doing it.
Yeah. I'll just invite people to because we're going to take some questions from those who are on the webinar today. So please, if you've got questions, pop them in the Q&A. That'd be great. Perhaps the last thing I'll ask you as well, because you have very strong long-term connections with Monash University through your father, who I know very well. He was the head of the Department of General Practice for many years, a great mentor to myself, Deputy Dean of the Medical Faculty, and so on. So he's well known in the Monash community. Now, perhaps you didn't get the medical genes from him. Did you get the singing genes from him?
God, no. He doesn't. Unfortunately, he doesn't sort of have musical bones in his body. But his father was a cantor in a sort of synagogue pre and post war, I think, and and he could sing a bit. And in fact, only last year, I used to live near Carlisle Street in Balaclava, and so you meet a lot of religious Jewish people if you're open to it. And I met this guy, and in a random series of events, and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Josh Piterman." He's like, "I know your father. Not only do I know your father, I know your father's father. No one would sing like him in the synagogue. He had such a voice." And I didn't really know about this really at all. My dad didn't talk about it, but he's like, "And I followed your career, and your voice is just like him, but it's probably more trained, but it's just like his, the passion, the emotion." I was like, "Oh my God." So yeah, it does run in the genes, just it skipped a generation. Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, yeah.
Bearing
Maybe
the
maybe
cholesterol bad.
he never woke those genes up
Nah,
at the
nah. And we're hoping that it doesn't start now. Yeah.
late in life. So, Kevin, I'll throw back to you, and
Nice.
happy to take some questions, Josh.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Perfect. Perfect. It's nice to jump back into the mix, as well. So, Josh, there's a lot of questions coming in. So let's see if we can get to them all, and if we can't get to them all, we're sorry. But you can all I've thrown some of Josh's places you can connect with Josh into the chat there as well. So feel free to follow up and keep prodding him with many different questions. Just a question that did come in. You talked about how you do a little bit of coaching with people, and a question came in. So, how do you strike a balance between creativity and play, but then also empirical and evidence-based approaches to the coaching? Also, the lived experiences that you have. Like, how do all these different kinds of elements influence your coaching?
Yeah, so I'd say the coaching is definitely a blend of sort of where science and spirituality meet. And a lot of that science is around both our physiological state, so from a nervous system perspective, and done a lot of work with like the Heart Math Institute. So we're going into things like heart rate variability. We're going to things like CO2 tolerance, especially when you're working with athletes. You want to sort of increase that CO2 tolerance so oxygen can travel more efficiently to the brain and to the muscles and whatever, recover faster, be better. A lot of my athletes are in the AFL system, so perform better at the end of games and the end of quarters and whatnot. And then we're looking at the visualization work I do with them. We know how strong visualization is for neuroplasticity, and so we're going into a bit of that. I try not to. I give them enough data and enough evidence. Sometimes they're hooked up to things, but I don't like to overwhelm them with that much stuff, especially when they're in environments where, like, a footy player they're like bordering on robots. Like the amount of sort of data analysis going on, and they track this, track that, and so to be in a space where it is more experiential is really important. So the conversations we're having they don't need to be sort of empirical. They need to be felt and experienced and for really I'm hoping that these athletes come out not confident but believing, and in their own innate enoughness and their own innate worth and their purpose and why they're here. And I say confidence because confidence and belief are two different things. I feel like for athletes, for all of us, confidence can undulate. We can have days, we're in front of goal kicking it and it's always going through the big sticks, and days where it's just not, and that's, again, that can feed into confidence going up and down. But belief I sort of describe as like, Kevin, you're a man of religion, and, I sort of use Jehovah's Witness or Mormonism. Like, they knock on your door and they invite you to have a relationship with Jesus, and whether or not you do or you don't, it doesn't stop them knocking on the next door and the next door and the doors for eternity, because it's belief. They don't become less confident in Jesus. So that's the state I want them to get to about their own sense of self. Because so many of these people, athletes, are actually lacking in belief, surprisingly.
Yeah, no. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to combine a few questions. A lot of people have been asking about your particular practices, Josh, and you mentioned things like you mentioned some of the practices like breath work. And so some of again, I'm combining a few questions here, but could you expand a little bit on the breath work, and what are maybe some other practices, like you yourself in your own personal practice? What do you really use? has that changed over time? And one thing a few people have asked is like, what's kept you going in your practice?
Mm. So I use multiple things, and I'm sort of at the point where I see everything as spiritual practice. Literally every move that I make, or everything that's happening, is a part of a symbiotic relationship with something that's bigger than me, that I'm intrinsically connected to. And I'll come back to that Rumi quote. You're, you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop. So I'm constantly feeling that there is something symbiotic happening. In terms of, we look at what mindfulness is, and I feel like going to the gym can be mindful. I feel like choosing to have my phone at home while I take the dog for a walk is mindful. But when it comes to meditation and breath work, I have a couple of times a day practice. And it depends on time and what's going on. I have to work with life and appointments and whatever. But there will always be some heart coherence breathing, which is a very simple technique, and what is described as, from a scientific lens, the perfect breath. It's 5.5 seconds in through the nose, 5.5 seconds out. And sometimes I just do that for 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes I expand that to imagining nostrils in the center of my chest, and then breathing in a heart-based emotion, whether that's gratitude or kindness or care or compassion or forgiveness or acceptance, and allowing that to fill up my entire body. It's like this is all derivatives of love in some way. It's like liquid love sort of pouring through. And then I'll start to paint a picture in my mind of an image of a person or a place or a pet, maybe even, that is connected to that emotion. So if it's gratitude, for example, I might paint a picture, Ziggy, of this little, come here, chicken, this little Muppet who I'm eternally grateful for, just sweetie. So, and that's a meditative practice. Sometimes I use a more Vedic based technique, a mantra, TM's derivative of that, and whatever else. And then sometimes before going out on stage, I have particular techniques. And because I've learnt lots of different things over the years, especially now with regard to breath, and I feel like I can sort of go, I'm feeling this. This is what I need right now. But I'll come home to 2 or 3 different things. Yeah.
Nice. Doing dog meditation is fantastic. I'm totally on board with that. It's like, in my role, I wish I could emphasize more dog meditation. So
well, because they're just unconditionally loving vessels.
Great.
They don't. If I didn't feed her for a day, she'd still give me the same amount of kisses as if I did. Like, she just doesn't. She doesn't know anything but to love. What a beautiful thing. And ultimately, so much of this work is about coming back to love. That's really what it is. That's what's connecting us. So little doggos like this are beautiful to meditate on.
So you mentioned love there. We got a few minutes, and so I'll ask one question that just came in that I think is perfect, and it's probably going to be hard to put into the last few minutes. But you've done many different things throughout your life, and doing things that like really seem like they're like quite purposeful. So Rosie actually asked us like, she wonders like, have you found the purpose of your life, and what do you think the purpose of your life is in all these different roles that you've played?
Yeah, I think so. I know that my gift isn't singing. My gift is connection and communication and building relationships. And singing is just one vessel, but so is podcasting and writing and coaching, and they're all vessels for communication and connection. And a part of that is to create spaces where people can move from the ordinary world into feelings that are non-ordinary, to really feel into the expanse of what it means to be human. And that's what my purpose is, to create spaces for that. And whatever modality it is that I'm sharing through, it's all about that. And a lot of that is about feeling into love. That's because for me, I think that it's that is what coalesces the universe. That is the most powerful force we have. Like people say, it's fear, but I think it's love. And when we feel into that love, we feel that sense of oneness, we feel that connection, and ultimately belonging is such an important part of what it is to be human. But belonging in that deeper level. So I hope that I'm sharing that purpose in a way that is succeeding in some capacity. Yeah.
Wonderful. Must be about time for us to finish there, Kevin. I think on that elevated note, and thank you as well for the introduction to your dog as well. I think there is yeah. So I just wanted to say on behalf of everybody on the call today, Josh, thank you so much for sharing and so openly and fully with us, and also we wish you all the very best in your ongoing work, not just yourself, but the work that you do with so many others as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Craig and Kevin. And I look forward to seeing much more of you both in the future.
Yeah.